Welcome to the first Arpexas Podcast with me, Dan Peters, and
Andy Peters.
We're going to try and speak to some people based in veterinary medicine, animal science, livestock technology and the like, and conduct some interviews. So we thought no better place to start than Le Grand Chien, as our middle brother would say. So we're going to start at the beginning, really, Dad. You obviously, being a veterinary doctor or vet, you have interest in animals. What were your first memories of animals and being interested?
Well, grew up in a village in the Midlands of England, and we lived very close to a farm, small dairy farm. And my brother, who was 3 years older than me, went to work on the farm. And can't remember quite why now, but I followed him up there one day and decided I quite liked doing that, and sort of ended up working on various farms. This was from the age of about 12 and through until my late teens, really. So I just got very interested in farming.
So you're a dairy farm, so cows clearly, and you've mentioned your age. We at that time. Could you give us just without being too specific, a broad time that this would have been? What era?
Longer ago than I care to remember, really. But no, I mean, it was in the 50s. So I would have started to go onto farms in about 1960, probably. I was growing up in the 50s. Would have been 10 or 11 in 1960, and started around that time.
And I remember you telling me that the farm was owned by two brothers, was it, at the time?
Horace and Roy.
Horace and Roy. Manual milking, I'm assuming?
Well, it was mechanical milking, but based on buckets in those days. And I seem to remember where they just had two milking machines. There were something like 16 cows. I think they did stretch out at one point to buy a third milking machine. I can't quite remember it, but it was pretty basic in those days, obviously. And there was one cow. Yeah. It was a Jersey. Most of them were Friesians, but there was one cow, a Jersey, and her teats were too small for the milk machine to stay on. So Horace used to have to milk that one by hand.
Great. And so you say through into your teens, and do you remember a specific moment? You obviously must have decided either I'm going to be a farmer or I'm going to be a vet.
Well, I wanted to be a farmer, and my brother decided to go into farming, and he went to agricultural college. And I remember this conversation I had with my parents one day, and they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I want to go to agricultural college like my brother Jeff. And they weren't so keen on that. And to be truthful, I think they felt I was more academically talented than him, and so they said, well, why don't you become a vet? And of course this was pre-James Herriot days, but I do remember reading a book by a lady vet. I can't even remember either what it was called or who the author was these days, but that kind of motivated me into doing that.
So the time comes, you've got to leave Horace and Roy. What were the first steps?
Well, I worked on several farms and over successive years, and I suppose Horace and Roy taught me all they could over a period of time. Not that seemed to be the idea. The idea was to work and earn a bit of pocket money, and it was pretty poor money, I have to say, even by the standards those days, and a bit unpredictable whether I get paid at all. But anyway. Things moved on, and I did O-levels, A-levels as they were in those days, and got on a waiting list to go to vet school. Wasn't really that committed because I remember I applied to do psychology as well at the same time. But eventually I got on the waiting list of two vet schools, London and Liverpool, and it wasn't till about middle of September, with the term due to start in October, that I actually got an acceptance. And I think I got accepted by both. And then I had to make a choice, and I chose London.
So that was it. That was it. So from Leicestershire off down to London, out of the village into the big city. You've just had a bit of a reunion this weekend, have you, with the chaps that you moved into the flat with? Would that?
Yeah, we did actually, and we were celebrating 53 or 54 years since we graduated. So that was quite an event. But of course, we're not as young as we were, none of us, and we've all got our aches and pains.
So take us through then. You arrive at vet school within a couple of weeks, find digs and get in there. So what's the first year? What were you doing?
Well, I suppose it was a big adjustment because, there I am, country boy from the Midlands, village in the Midlands, and suddenly planted in the middle of the smoke and with lots of others. And all of a sudden you're a very, very small fish in a pretty large pool. And I can't say that it was a particularly smooth or happy experience to begin with. It took quite a lot of adjustment to. And also, the studying was pretty intense actually, or the need for it, and I wasn't all that good a student in those days in terms of attentiveness.
I don't believe that for a moment. So, just for those of us that don't know, what's the first sort of undergrad degree that you study then at vet school?
Well, in the case of London, it is the vet course, which is 5 years, 4 and 2/3 or 5 years. But there are opportunities to do a BSc in the third year. It's called intercalation. But the model differs in different schools actually, the ways it can be done. But in effect, the vet course is around 5 years.
And this continued as cows, large animals, or more broad?
Well, in veterinary medicine,
let's cut to the science.
In veterinary medicine in the UK, they have these days, although it wasn't quite as well defined in those days, as the so-called day one skill set. Really, that things that you have to be able to do on day one, and it's really having to or knowing how to deal anything that's thrown at you in any species. So it's pretty challenging. Obviously, you do in the study. You study some more than in more detail than others. But basically, dogs, cats, cattle, sheep, pigs, horses, obviously, are the main species. But other things as well. And for example, other species, particularly aquaculture, has become pretty important. There are fish specialists and all those sorts of things.
Mm. So you have your 5 years, or your 4 and 2/3 years, 3/4 years. I know the answer. Did you pass first time?
I'm not answering that question.
Okay, so you get your qualification, and it's off into the big wide world. And so where does your first post take you?
So that was interesting in a way, because I was never very committed, in all honesty. But what had happened during the course, I felt I wanted to do further study, and I was actually more interested in the normal animal than in the sick animal, diseased animal, in other words, the medicine and pathology, really. So what I was interested in was the physiology and the biochemistry. Anyway, I felt the need to consolidate what I'd learnt in college and went into general practice. And my first job was as a locum vet in the city of Coventry.
Any highlights from that period, from being in practice? Because obviously many of us know that wasn't, you didn't continue in practice, as I know a lot of, or some of your college friends did.
Well, I had a year there, met my wife, my future wife, now my ex-wife, and it's where you and your two brothers came from. But one thing led to another in a way, and we didn't stay in that place very long, and we moved down the road into Northamptonshire in Daventry, and I was there for another year. But then I kept having this sort of desire to go back into further education, and ended up going to Nottingham University to do a PhD in animal physiology.
Okay. So take us through a bit about your PhD. Where did the inspiration for the animal physiology come from? And more specifically, what were some of the studies that made up your research?
You know, during life, at least I find you have a series or guided consciously or unconsciously by a series of role models. And there was a person I met during my college days. He was actually a botanist, not an animal person at all. But he talked about doing this thing called a PhD, and it kind of caught my imagination a little bit. And I thought, that's something I'd like to do. Sounds good. And that's kind of gave me the idea. And then I was involved with some friends back home. And there was a particular guy who was turned out to be an animal technician, worked at this place called Sutton Bonington, which was University of Nottingham School of Agriculture. And he was talking about this guy, Eric Lamming, who was an expert on cattle fertility. Not a vet, but working from the physiological point of view. And this intrigued me. And eventually one day I saw an advert in the paper for a PhD programme at Nottingham working in his department, and so I applied for it and was lucky enough to get that, and I went there to do that PhD.
Great. So just again for the scientists and the vets that are watching this, what was involved in your PhD?
I won't go into too much detail about that because they are very detailed things, but I started off studying lactation actually rather than reproduction and fertility, and it was about milk protein and how the different amino acids combine together to form milk protein, and which are the most essential amino acids and how they're metabolized in the mammary gland and how they come together to form proteins.
Great, and it took you. I'm assuming you were working at Nottingham as well during your PhD.
I was actually a demonstrator in physiology, so I was actually teaching mostly human physiology to students.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so demonstrating how to take blood pressure, and there were some there were some animal experiments that are somewhat frowned on these days that we were doing, but I won't go into that just now.
No, of course. So you finished under Professor Lamming's guidance and achieved your PhD. And where did that take Dr. Peters?
Yeah, so I was sitting in the office one day, and I was sort of musing about what the future held, and I thought, well, here I am now. I'm on this academic ladder, and I'm on the bottom rung, but I suppose I'm going to climb it. So I actually was doing postdoc work and thinking, I'll go lecturer, senior lecturer, and so on. And then one day, my boss, Eric Lamming, walked into my office. He said, "I've got you a job, fella." That was his way of speaking. And I said, "Oh, have you? That's interesting. What's that?" And he said, "I want you to go and work with a man called Dick Melrose at the Meat and Livestock Commission." And I knew this man, and I knew the organisation a little bit, and I thought, well, that's not at all what I want to do. And I said, "Well, I don't want to do that." He said, "Well, what do you want to do then?" I said, "Well, I was going to stay in the academic world." Oh, he said, "Well, no, go and do that, but you can carry on working with me as well. So you can do that in the day, and then you can continue to work with your beef cattle research," which is what I was doing, "in the evenings and weekends." So that's what I ended up doing for eight or 9 years, and I was the beef cattle vet for the MLC for eight or 9 years.
And a good run there?
Yes, in a way. Things were changing. It was at a time, towards the end of it, what was happening was that there was actually a very influential report came out about diet and health. And it was when all of the controversy, I'm going to call it, about the human intake of saturated fat, meat consumption, etc., kind of hit the headlines, and it was saying we need to reduce meat consumption, we need to reduce animal fat consumption for the benefit of our hearts. And so, whereas the industry had been all about increasing production and productivity, it suddenly switched to kind of diet and health. And so my kind of interests almost became yesterday's interest. So the job sort of lost some interest for me, and I decided it was time to move on.
Okay. So based on the changing politics, I guess, the changing mood around meat consumption. Okay, so where are we in the sort of in don't want to be specific in your career and your age?
I'm getting to, I think, this would have been about 1988, 89 when I'd done my stint at MLC, and I was looking around for something else. I did take a job for a very brief time in London with an organisation called British Technology Group, but it was a short spell, and I'd decided on day one that it wasn't for me. I wasn't quite sure what to do, but I knew I didn't want to be there, so I resigned, and I left. But I left in a very precarious way because I had a wife, three children, by then, and a mortgage, and suddenly no job. And thought what I might do. I called up a friend of mine and said, I'm thinking of going into consultancy. Can you give me some work? And he said, and he worked for one of the local animal health companies at the time, said, it so happens we have a job going which we think might suit you. So I ended up going there, and this was as regulatory manager, working on the regulation of veterinary medicines, and where we were, there was a period that the EC, as it was then, was tightening up regulations in a number of areas, and that field was developing very rapidly, and they needed to increase their resources putting into that, and also update all their dossiers and so forth. So I went there, an organisation called Arpexas Animal Health, which is based in Milton Keynes, as you know.
So you're at Arpexas. So is this the first step into industry?
Yes, it is. I mean, the MLC was a kind of quasi-industry, but it wasn't animal health industry. It was livestock production industry and meat industry, so it's a little different. But I'd always had ideas I would like to kind of sample industry, so it suited me very well at the time. And I'd been there for a while, and then they came to the manager who was looking after quality control of vaccine production. They're retired, and they asked me to take on that role as well. I had little experience in that field, but so it was kind of on-the-job learning and training, really. And again, it was at a time when the regulations were becoming a lot stricter, and so there was a lot of change going on, quite a lot of stress in the organisation in order to keep up with the stricter regulations. But what happened then, after a few years, there was a job came up at my alma mater at the Royal Veterinary College as Professor of Animal Health. And it's a job that I had always coveted in the background, and I thought, I have to go for this. I need to go for this. I want this job. And I was lucky enough to be appointed. And so my sojourn in Arpexas was only about 4.5 years. And then I moved back to the RVC, as I said, became Professor of Animal Health, thought that was where I wanted to be, always my ambition. And then the next thing happened.
Go on then.
Well, I'd been there for 4.5 years. And again, that was in a period of intense change in academia, and particularly in vet schools. A lot of pressure to increase student numbers in order to bring in more funding, a lot of pressure to also deliver on research, because we were now in a time when research output was being evaluated by government organisations. And so there was pressure to bring in money all the time. And that was fine. I didn't mind that particularly, but I found the academic world pretty frustrating in some respects. And one day the phone rang, and there's a man on the end of the phone, and he said, oh, hello, I'm giving you a call because I'm representing a company, an international company, and they're looking for someone to head up a new veterinary vaccine development group. And I thought about this, and I thought, yeah, well, I know a few people who could do that, who might be interested. And I mentioned a few names, and he said, actually, well, we were thinking of you, actually. Would you be interested? And I said, well, I've actually got the job that I've always wanted. But then I sort of sat back and thought, am I really happy here? And I thought, maybe not. So I said, tell me more. One thing led to another, and eventually I left the RVC and joined a company, Pfizer Animal Health, which some years later transmuted into what is now Zoetis. So I moved down to near Sandwich in Kent and joined Pfizer Animal Health, and this would have been in about 1998, I think.
Okay, and your role there was, as you've sort of described, back into the development and regulatory. So you've moved away from this idea of being a farmer and involved with animals and looking after cows and husbandry and all of the things that come with that.
Very much so, I had, really. But it was all kind of related back to it, and I was always interested in the farm animals more than others. Even when I was in practice, I was spending more time doing farm work than companion animal work. And so I've never sort of moved kind of psychologically too far away from cattle, actually.
No, so that I remember took you to the US eventually over.
Yeah, it did. So I was in the UK based for a couple of years, and then they promoted me and asked me to go to the US to effectively run an international and a larger group. So I was there for 3 years doing that, and then I came back to the UK after that for a further time.
And it was following that you moved into or set the consultancy up, or while you were there?
Well, no. I mean, basically, what happened, and I suppose I can go into the detail because
I was going to say you can give as much detail as you do or don't want.
It may be of interest to others, but being a man who had grown up in a certain period and had certain habits in life, developed pretty serious heart disease and ended up having to have radical surgery, coronary bypass, and that took me off work for a while. And when I went back, I think the company decided that it would be better if I went on to do something else. So I left the organisation in 2005, 2006. At the age of, I'm thinking about 55 then, and wondering what I was going to do. So I set up my company, Arpexas, at that moment. So it's about 20 years ago now, actually.
Great, and this is the incarnation of Andy Peters that we know now. And Arpexas stands for Andrew Raymond Peters.
For excellence in animal science.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, good. So a pretty bold move, really. And what were those first sort of stages? You've gone from having the job with Pfizer and the stability of that into taking your own expertise and trying to find some contracts, I'm guessing.
Pretty scary.
Yeah.
And everybody said, "Oh, don't worry, Andy, you've got a terrific network. You'll have no problem at all." Well, sitting there at your desk without the phone ringing, you think, well, I'm not so sure. But eventually it does, and, things develop. And I suppose the key thing that happened, sitting in my study in my house in Kent, was that I was immediately attracted to Scotland, to the Edinburgh area, because there was a lot going on up there, or so it seemed, in the life sciences, and good opportunities for a consultant like me. So very much my initial clientele was based around that area. So I started a period of commuting up and down from Kent to at the Edinburgh area, doing various consultancy activities. but I was always looking to probably get back into employment if I could, and even in temporary kinds of jobs. And over time, I had several of those actually.
So we've moved over. We're in the 20s now. We've been over the millennium. How much had veterinary science, animal science, and veterinary medicine changed in the period from, say, you graduating through to you starting your consultancy?
Well, the French have a saying, I think, and I'll probably misquote it: "Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose." Basically, everything changes, but also everything stays the same, and it's a little bit like that. I'll give you one example. Dan, you're working with me now. You've been working on these digital devices. What are the digital devices aimed at doing initially? What was the first thing we were looking at?
Health management and heat detection.
Heat detection.
Yeah.
Well, in the 60s and 70s, we were saying to farmers, heat detection's the big problem. You need to be doing this. You need to be spending time watching your cows detecting heat. Now, it's still the same issue in order to optimise the time of insemination. But of course, we've moved on a little bit because we're not just saying these things to farmers in the UK, but as I'm sure you'll get around to, our focus now is very much in sub-Saharan Africa, and we have the same issues going on there in their livestock production as we have here.
So you worked for there was a few fairly significant contracts through the first half of Arpexas's incarnation, and do you want to just mention a few of those?
Yeah, well, I guess the significant one in this context was there was an organisation just starting up, and it happened to be in the Edinburgh area. Actually, at the time, it was called GALV, Global Alliance for Livestock Vaccines, and a charitable-based organisation to help develop vaccines for livestock in lower and middle income countries where it was perceived there was a lack of these products. It seemed to me just the very sort of thing I would like to be actively involved in, and they became an early client. It changed its name then to GALVMed, Global Alliance for Livestock Veterinary Medicines, and that's the way it ended up, if I might put it that way. Still going today. Obviously, things have changed. This was around 2006, 2007, I think, that it started up. But I've worked for them over the years, and was interim CEO for a period in 2012. I still do occasional work for them. But also I have developed my own interests in similar activities in Africa, and also had other opportunities to work in that field, and particularly sponsored by what was then Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, now Gates Foundation, and still working with Gates Foundation.
Yeah, I mean, so carry on. Take us through sort of the next sort of stages in the progress and the integration with Edinburgh University.
Well, what happened there really is that it seems I keep jumping from job to job, and that to an extent is true. I at one point in 2013, I think it was, I was offered a job in what's now Scotland's Royal College, SRUC, to help develop their international business, and so I was asked to go and join them because they saw opportunities for expansion of their teaching and research activities into Africa. And so I went there for a period. But I had a very good friend and colleague working in the Gates Foundation, and he asked me, first of all, to help set up an organisation in Edinburgh University in the Roslin Institute and International Livestock Research Institute, ILRI, in Nairobi, Kenya, on genetics, on genetic improvement of livestock. Would I help set that grant up? which I did, but I also took the opportunity to bring SRUC into that partnership. So it became a three-way partnership, and again, this is still going. But also around the same time, or just after that, my same colleague from Gates wanted to set up a new organisation.
This is Sam.
Sam Tavis-Agayam, Dr. Sam Tavis-Agayam, to set up a new organisation to curate, analyse and report on data from livestock health and productivity in Africa, by and large, because the lack of data around productivity was thought to be a major inhibiting factor to livestock improvement. And if you look at the way livestock's improved in the developed countries, dairy industry, beef industry, etc., it's all based on having data and being able to record what animals are doing in order to be able to improve their management and circumstances, health, etc. So the same principles apply. So they wanted to set up an organisation to do this, to establish this much better. And I was asked to do it. And what happened is we took it to Edinburgh University, and really it was to build on the legacy that had been developed many years before by an organisation called the CTVM, the Centre for Tropical Veterinary Medicine, which had been in the university for many years and was very well known worldwide. So I did that. I went and set that up 2016, did that.
That was SEBI.
SEBI.
Yeah, SEBI-Livestock. Yeah.
Supporting evidence-based interventions for livestock. And so I did that for a number of years. I'm trying to remember how many exactly. 6 or 7 years.
We've tried to remain fairly loose on specific dates.
Yes, Well, I've got them all somewhere. But at the same time, I was still running consultancy in the background. And then 2 or 3 years ago, I decided, I couldn't keep operating at that kind of pace, and so I let the SEBI go and let the next generation take over. And bearing in mind what I'd said about moving away from academia way back in my career, I still had those feelings really that I didn't really want to be there in that way. I never saw myself as a real dyed-in-the-wool academic, if I can put it that way. So I was much more interested in trying to do stuff in some of these countries. And so I've had that opportunity for the last few years, again, working with Gates to do that. I have other contracts as well. As you well know, we're working on some other things, but by and large, that is the major activity.
So to bring us, I guess, up to, when I say current post-SEBI periods, the significant change, I imagine, has been the growth in technology and AI, large data, IoT, or all of these sort of phrases that we're familiar with. What have been the big changes that you think that these have brought to both, well, I guess the academic side and the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still evaluating that as far as our own work's concerned, but it's clear that, again, in the developed countries where there are significant livestock industries, you take the UK dairy industry, and I've been telling people that the uptake of digital technologies, digital devices and management aids is almost universal. Everybody's doing it, and there's still work to do on the cost benefit to some extent, but the benefits are pretty clear, and so we think that there is huge potential in developing countries to adopt those technologies, if it can be done in a cost-effective way, to improve product health and productivity. And as I said before, in order to be able to improve things, you need to know what's going on. And so digital methods are a good way of doing that, because people don't want to be standing next to animals all the time with a pencil and a clipboard, writing down data. So if it's all done without human intervention, it's a massive, massive change.
And I guess we're talking about precision livestock farming, aren't we? And the precision comes back to, I guess, the heat detection and the productivity, doesn't it? The health of animals. So I've got two final sort of questions, unless you've got anything that you'd like to add.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So the first one is, what do you see happening in terms of the area of your expertise in animal health in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think digital will certainly continue to move forward and hopefully be adopted on a large scale in Africa. There are already signs it's happening. I've predicted on a number of occasions that it will be like mobile phones, the way that was massively adopted in Africa. One day nobody had any, and the next day everybody's got one. It's been that kind of revolution. But secondly, we haven't really mentioned AI, but clearly AI is part of it, and we're seeing, dramatic change in the way we do consultancy already. It sort of simplifies things, it speeds things, and helps enormously with finding information and data. I'm an old man, so I'm learning slowly how to use it. So that's and it changes. It seems almost day by day. So I don't know. I can't predict where this is going to go, and I think even the gurus can't really predict where it's going to go. We hear all sorts of scare stories and so on and so forth. But I don't know. I'm optimistic about it, how that it can help transform lives, I suppose. I was going to say livestock health and productivity because that's what we're about directly, but what that's about is improving human lives, and I'm looking forward to the days when all that is apparent and all that happens.
And on a personal level, do you prefer scalpels or sensors? Do you prefer
that question, I suddenly realise, goes quite deep.
No pun intended.
No, right, and probably at the end of the day, sensors, because it probably takes me back. I still actually like lifting a car bonnet and looking at what's under and trying to fix it, actually, and. Maybe that's what I should have done instead of veterinary medicine. Who knows? It's a bit late now to change.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I am gonna. What do you think has been the biggest contribution to over your career?
Of mine?
Yeah.
I would like to think at the end of the day that I've mentored and supported and encouraged some people who I was asked to supervise, take care of, or whatever. Motivate. I hope that I've motivated and helped them, because it sounds trite, but that's what your life's about in the end. It's helping others. We used to have a saying, helping others succeed. And I say it sounds trite, but if I've done that, then I guess it's been worthwhile.
Well, I think that's a pretty nice sentiment to wrap up on, really. Thanks. We've quite enjoyed it, our first Arpexas trial podcast, and hopefully everything's worked and not stopped recording. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, I've enjoyed talking about myself. Thank you very much.